Hi, I'm Neris Walters, co-founder of Potentia.
And I'm Dominique Highfield, CFO of Bloom & Wild.
So Dominique, who are you meeting today?
We are meeting Andrew Belshaw, who is the CEO of Gamma Communications PLC.
Fantastic. Let's get going.
Hi, I'm here with Andrew Belshaw, CEO of Gamma Communications PLC. Andrew, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Really grateful. We'd love to know more about you, Andrew. So please tell us a bit more. You were previously the CFO and now you're the CEO. So tell us a bit more about your journey, how you got to where you are today.
Well, firstly, thank you very much for inviting me. Goodness me, where does one start doing that journey? I mean, should we start at the very beginning?
I think that's a great place to start.
As I think Mary Poppins said, all the and you should feel free to get me to dive into wherever you want to dive in. So yeah, as you said, I was a CFO, so I started out life as an accountant, and actually deep down, I still feel I'm an accountant, even though I'm a CEO these days. So I probably had a very standard accounting upbringing. I went to one of the big four. I did auditing, got bored with auditing, as I think many of us do.
I did
so
too.
Exactly. So I was sort of lucky that they let me try and do a bit of corporate finance as well. So I did that. And then I got to a stage where I was like, I probably stayed in practice too long. I think I was in practice at various firms for about 8 or 9 years in the end. And I think that was probably a little bit long because I don't think I ever particularly wanted to sort of go down the partner route, but I was kind of enjoying what I was doing and life. So I thought, right, now is the time to break out and go and be an FD. And I think one of the really nice things when you start off in audit is you see loads and loads of different companies and loads of different industries and actually loads of different roles because you're talking to FP&A people, management accountants and all that sort of stuff. So I think it's a really good grounding for getting you an idea of what you want to do and the industry you want to do it in and all that sort of stuff. And I thought probably something in tech would be kind of interesting because that's sort of interesting and I understood it a bit. Being an FD, kind of interesting. So I sort of started talking to headhunters as you do, and the first thing they sort of said to me was this: you don't have any commercial experience. And I'm sure we'll come on and talk about commercial accounting because I think it's a really important area. And nobody could really articulate to me what commercial experience actually was, other than spending quite a long time in practice was considered to be a bad thing. So I think kind of top tip number one: don't spend as long time as practice as I did. Would be my first piece of advice.
Well, unless you want to make partner.
In which case you're sort of lumbered with that at that point, aren't you? If you want to be a partner. But again, we can talk. I've got views on all of that as well. So you end up leaving to do a role that's not quite what you wanted to do. So I actually went to work for a business process outsourcing company. Essentially pricing contracts. So what we would do is, you'd have a sort of large enterprise business that wants to outsource its accounting function, its IT function, and you'd price all of that up, which was good fun. So I did that for a bit.
How was that transition? You said you were in practice too long. How did you find that transition into FD?
So that wasn't an FD role. That was like I can't remember what it was called now, commercial accountant or something like that. You lose a lot of the support network when you're in. I hadn't realised quite what a support network you've got around you, and at one level,
and resources and things.
Exactly. Yeah. People may or may not like this. You're quite mollycoddled, I think, in practice, because there's a lot of things you don't have to do, and people do all of those things for you. And then all of a sudden, you're sort of sitting out on your own with very little support. You've got no, because by that time I was in practice, I was a manager and stuff, and all the stuff you don't fancy doing, you can just push out. And suddenly you've got no staff. It's just like, or you have one or two people, and it's just you, and you're doing everything, and which is sort of fun at one level, sort of frustrating at another level. So it's a sort of difficult transition to manage. But yeah, so did that for a couple of years and got the commercial experience that everyone was craving. And then I've been very lucky in my career. I've not moved around. I think I'm lucky. I don't know.
I think it's probably self-made luck.
I don't know. Because I became an FD, or my first FD role was this little company called Gamma, which at the time was 120 people. I utterly failed to do my due diligence on it properly. Having done, that was my job in practice, doing due diligence. I hadn't realised quite how unprofitable the company was at that time. So I went to this business, 120 people, thinking I wouldn't be there for that long, through my choice rather than the company. And kind of here I am 18 years later, having taken a sort of divisional FD role, moved into that sort of CFO role, moved into CEO. And yeah, So that's the sort of journey at the high level.
18 years later. And so
18 years later. Yeah.
I think about this a lot, and I've met people that struggle with this. You obviously moved up through the ranks
Yes.
in Gamma, and then your peers become your your direct reports and things.
Yeah.
How did you, for people listening, how did you handle that transition? Any top tips for those people?
I think that is one of the hardest things, and do I have any tips on it? It's a really odd thing, and actually that CFO move into CEO move is the strangest one, because you are going from a group of peers to suddenly you're running that team.
Yeah. With all the politics and dynamics.
And it's the dynamics, but also everybody treats you differently at that point. And I think I found as CFO, and I think it depends a little bit on who you are as CFO, you're almost like the agony uncle of the team. A little bit. So I had lots of people coming and talking to me, kind of saying, I'm not sure we should be doing this. Or so. Because as CFO, you have the ear of the CEO.
Yeah.
And you're generally, it's like a sort of presidential, vice presidential thing. You're generally the last person in the room as CFO talking to the CEO. And generally you have the ability to say to your CEO, look, just say, round the table without going into things. There's a couple of people who aren't quite sure about what we're doing, or they want a bit more, or whatever it happens to be. And I think that's a really sort of special role. Then you kind of move to being CEO, and nobody's having those conversations. And it's the strangest thing that you've gone from being that sort of and you're sort of sitting there going, it's still me. I'm still the same person.
But no one's
but actually, suddenly,
like
it's Bill, my CFO, who's sort of coming up to me going, just so you know, Andrew, there's a couple of people who, and you suddenly.
And so suddenly, overnight, people didn't want to be sharing things.
It's a very strange thing that people stop talking to you, and you just have to kind of reconcile yourself to that. And it's not you. It's the role.
It's the role, yes.
And I think it's you all have found this as you move, even going from a divisional FD to being a CFO, roles kind of mean something, and they're looked at in particular ways, and actually stamping your personality on that is sometimes really hard, because people just think, well, a CFO will say this or behave like this, a CEO will think this or behave like this, and therefore people kind of don't talk to you in quite the same way. And I find that really... your question was have I got any top tips for dealing with it? And I'm not sure I have, to be honest. I think there is an element of I think accepting it, because you do sort of sit there for a little while looking around going, what have I done? And actually all you've done is taken a new job title, and people just impose on you what they think that job title is going to mean for you.
You do need to wear the jacket a bit, though, don't you? In terms of as you elevate through the ranks, as people start to see you differently, you do need to sort of maybe not be the last one at the bar or the drinks, or maybe not be over, and being able to have those difficult conversations with people as well. So
exactly.
You do, though people perceive you differently, you do have to start wearing a different jacket as well,
which
is hard.
You do, and that's one of the other things I've found. You talk about not being the last person at the bar. It's absolutely that. People kind of don't want you. You suddenly find that you're not actually invited to some of the social stuff. And again, it's not because people don't like you. Well, I don't think. Maybe it is. I don't know. I don't think it's because people don't like you, because I'm the same person I always was. But I think there is increasingly an element of in the CEOs around it does change the dynamics of things. And I think you can try really hard not to do that. And as what I sort of found is I've obviously got a personality. You've got a personality. The role has a personality. And it's just trying to stamp but you never get rid of it entirely. But you can do as much as you possibly can. Yeah.
So apart from people not inviting you to drinks and not being your agony
just
uncle
being
anymore,
a social pariah now.
What else is? Do you lose more sleep as a CEO? What's the big transition for you as you move from the CFO to CEO?
The biggest single thing that you just have to reconcile yourself with is when you're a CFO. You have a team. However, I joined Gamma, I had a team of 4. By the time, I stopped being CFO, I think we had a team of 100 or something ridiculous. But you know what they all do, and so I know what a tax accountant does. I know what FP&A do. I know what a management accountant does. I may or may not be able to do their job, but I know what they do. I know how they should do it. I know what a good one looks like, and you can run that. I think for most CFOs, because you've come through that. When you become a CEO, you start meeting people in marketing or product development or operations. You don't know what they do. You don't actually have any sort of objective view on whether they're good at it or not. And it's just very, very difficult. And that was, for me, that was the biggest change. That when you're in finance running a team meeting, you just sort of know what everybody does and you can be a lot more helpful. When you become CEO and you're talking, you just got a whole bunch of people who are much better, subject matter experts than you will ever be in their area. And you have to be able to live with that, and you have to be able to cope with that. You have to be able to cope with the uncertainty that brings, because you don't understand everything anymore.
And so how do you manage, is it about asking outrageously good questions? How do you manage and how do you get the right answers?
Well, I think it's just being humble, isn't it? I don't know if they're good questions. I think quite often they're just stupid questions. And I mean you'll have had it as a CFO.
I often don't know what's going on, actually.
No, but when you're running a finance team, sometimes your CEO, one of the other sort of C-level people, will come in and they'll ask you a question that you're thinking, okay, that's We're not, kind of getting above 11 plus now. And I'm sure I do that to the whole organisation the whole time. So I'd love to think they're really great, insightful questions. But I think just having the humility, and different people have different styles, don't they? But you can't bluff this stuff. Yeah. If you don't know what somebody's talking about, just fundamentally don't really know what you're talking about. Mm-hmm. So I think that's really helpful. I think as well, building up that network of people outside who you can just kind of, it's the same question. I mean, funnily enough, I was just seeing a guy just now who's knows about a part of our business in a parallel business. Just kind of going, there's some stuff going on. I just don't really understand what's going on. Can you help me just give an external view of what's going on? So that level of humility of just accepting that there's now huge parts of the business that you don't fully understand. And you can't unless you're running a really tight, you can't get your head around everything. So just keep asking those questions, but also learning to deal with the uncertainty that all of that brings. And
so all of that underpins is not being too proud. So having this network, having this humility, asking questions. Yeah. And that sort of pride comes before a fall and all that, doesn't it?
No, I think that's right. And I think it's difficult when you're sort of going or climbing up through an organisation, because I think the public face of a CEO generally has to be very much in control. Mm-hmm. And I think, so when I'm out sort of talking to analysts in the city, or when you're out talking to staff and all that sort of thing, you have to create this sort of persona that you've got vague idea what's going on, right? Because, they're your shareholders and they're your people and all that sort of good stuff. But actually, I think sometimes that creates the impression for younger people and people on the career ladder that we're more sorted out than we really are. Mm-hmm. And I think that can be a little bit intimidating. And I think, opportunities like this to sort of go, you will see one side of me, and I don't know, if you see me on a staff webcast or you see me on an analyst briefing, you will see one version of who I am. But actually it's nice to be able to have a conversation like this where you can kind of go, sometimes
your ducks aren't all in a row.
Exactly.
Yeah. I don't even know where some of my ducks are.
No, exactly. And as I say, one of them's actually a pigeon that's got there by accident, no one's noticed. No, I think that's right. And it is important for people to understand, CFOs haven't got everything sorted. CEOs haven't got everything sorted. You don't have to wait until you have absolutely everything sorted to take that leap or to take that next level.
And so when you don't have, so if you've obviously got, you've got one duck that's a pigeon at the moment, I've got a lost duck. What do you do in those, as a CEO? So is this where you call on your network and things? What do you do when things are going awry? So
I'm a very sort of consensus-driven individual, which again I think is, I always sort of had a perception when I was kind of growing up that CEOs or senior partners or whatever, they're just very, very decisive, and I think you kind of you watch whatever the sort of popular business programs on the telly are these days, and you kind of get these characters who are just very, very decisive. This is what we're doing. It's all this. If you don't like it, you can sling your hook and all that sort of stuff. And I think, again, you just realise actually there are people like that. We've all met them. Mm-hmm. Generally, you don't work for them for very long. Yeah. Generally, nobody works for them for very long. And generally, they don't have an awful lot of longevity in the role. And whereas if you sort of look at common media, that might not be how it kind of comes across. So I hugely like consensus. I hugely like going to chat to people, both within the organisation and outside of the organisation. And it is that it's I don't fully understand what's going on here. Can you just give me a view? And somebody said to me the other day, I was talking to another CEO, actually a CEO's job is quite often just to join the dots. It's just to pull all those reference points together, understand what people are thinking, and then just try and join them into something that looks a little bit cohesive, that we can move forward doing. And I think that was quite a helpful analogy for me, because I think that probably is what I do. I wouldn't have described it that way, but now it's been described to me that way. It makes sense. Yeah.
And you don't have to have a deep understanding. If you're crowdsourcing and sort of joining dots together and asking right questions, you don't need to have that deep understanding. But it's imagining also having great people working for you as well, having the right team around you.
Well, I mean, they always say that they recruit people better than you, and then you just work out how you're going to manage them. And I think that's absolutely true. It's just getting a great team around you. And not being afraid to shake that team up periodically, because as I say, I've been at Gamma for 18 years. We had a very, very different C-suite 18 years ago to the one we've got now. I suspect I won't be in Gamma in 18 years' time, but it'll be a very different C-suite, because the company morphs and evolves. And you'll see this doing the CFO role. The people who got you to a particular point in a growing company are not necessarily the people who are going to get you there. Some of them will realise that, and some of them won't.
It doesn't make them bad. It just means they have a different skill set.
But it's a difficult. It's always a difficult conversation. Throughout my career, sometimes you do have that conversation when somebody's like, "I'm not really sure I'm the right person to go on the next phase of the journey," and that. Well, actually, that can be difficult, because if you think they are the right person to go on the next phase, that's probably the most difficult conversation. But where people, they are getting to the stage of their career where actually the organisation needs a little bit more than they've got, something different from what they've got. Doesn't make them bad people, doesn't make them bad professionals. It's just, the organisation's morphed and changed a little bit. And sometimes you just need to, have those difficult conversations with people. But that's all part of growing up. Yeah. You have that as an FD, you have that as a CFO, you have that as a CEO.
And there's nothing worse than being in a role that you're not enjoying or you're not valued in. So I think it's the right thing to do for both parties,
Correct.
Isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah.
So talk to me, you mentioned Bill, your amazing CFO.
Yes.
Tell me, you've been a CFO, you now have a great CFO.
I do, yeah.
What makes a great CFO?
Goodness, I think part of it, going right back to first principles, is it does depend on the business you're in. I think a good private equity CFO is not necessarily a good public company CFO. I think a good small company CFO is not necessarily a good big company CFO. And I think part of anybody's career progression is what, do you know what you actually want to be? Yeah. I don't really interview quite so many people these days, but certainly when I was a CFO, you interview a lot of people in finance. And people come in, and it's you always go, what do you want to do, and where do you want? And, I want to be a CFO, and it's like, yeah, but what does that mean to you? Do you want my job? Do you want the CFO of Gamma's job? Actually, you trying to get experience to go and work in a smaller company? What does that mean? And I think a lot of people haven't really thought that through properly. And I think if you're not clear on where it is you want to go, you're not necessarily going to get there. So there's this sort of. Yes, there are some generic CFO skills to actually get back to answering the question that you asked me. But I suppose the point is I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all CFO. And I think as a young finance professional, part of what you might want to do is sit down and think about, A, do you want to be a CFO at all? B, what type of CFO do you want to be? Company, industry, location. I mean, I've spent most of my working life in the UK. I imagine a good US CFO is not necessarily a good UK CFO, and vice versa, because the markets are different. But I think for UK public companies, which is what I know because it's what I do. The very first thing our chairman said to us when we listed, so Andrew, you have one job to do as a CFO, which is just guide the market. Guide the market well. Tell them where we're going to go. Tell them the numbers we're going to do. Hit those numbers, and if you do that, you'll be fine.
Don't exceed them.
No, I couldn't possibly. On a public podcast, we couldn't sort of talk about ways of sticking a accrual on the balance sheet if you're having a good year. We never ever do any of that. Of course not. But but you're right. It is just tell people what you're going to do and deliver what you're going to do. And for me as a CEO of a public company, it's the same strategically. For a CFO of a public company, get your numbers out there, get them right. Hit those numbers, and then everything is going to be, absolutely fine. So yes, all the sort of standard stuff. You need to run a finance team. You need to build that properly. You need to do the management reporting properly. Give me all the management insights that I need to run the business. Help me to run the business. But I mean, first and foremost, it's just getting that FP&A piece right, and just saying this is what we're going to do, and actually delivering it. And that's very much
for you. That's the single most important thing for you.
I think public company CFO, which is why I say it's slightly different, because I think in a private equity world, everybody wants to know what they're going to do, But I think, when you're a public company, it's sometimes a lot harder to deviate from what you said you're going to do, because I've got so many shareholders to talk to and analysts and all that sort of stuff. So it's that. But for being a good CFO as well, and we were talking about this earlier, it's not just about going, here's a bunch of numbers. It's actually giving me and giving the rest of the team the story around those numbers and the insights around those numbers, and helping us understand, what's profitable, why it's profitable, what could be more profitable. Yep. Are there any bits of the business that actually in isolation aren't really delivering any profit, and do we need to kind of go and have a look at that? And those are the insights that you really get from the finance team. And I think this is where I annoy Bill, my CFO, because I used to run finance. I get very frustrated with myself. I don't know that stuff anymore. Mm-hmm. So back in the day, I just know all of that. And of course I don't now, because I'm just one step removed from it all. So yeah, you just sort of like to know what's going on. You like to know, I don't just want a big string of numbers or a big string of KPIs with red and green.
You want the strategic insights.
I want to know the insights of what is it that you want me to do that's going to drive this business forward. So
do what you say you're going to do to the market in terms of forecasting.
Absolutely.
Strategic insights with what's and what's next.
Yes.
And where you should be focusing your time. Anything else for those people wanting to business partner and be that vice president to the president?
Yes.
What's from a personal perspective or relationship perspective, what do you look for in that CFO?
Well, again, when you're recruiting, and this goes back to because what I'm looking for isn't necessarily what you'd be looking for. Mm-hmm. It's not necessarily what somebody, that chemistry, CFO, CEO chemistry is super, super important. Mm-hmm. One of the interesting things that I went through actually when I was CFO is our CEO retired and we got a new CEO in, which is a sort of really interesting thing, because the board's recruiting the CEO, but actually part of the recruitment process is it's almost like a blind date or something. It's like you as CFO have to go and sit with the new CEO, because if you two aren't going to get on, then we've got a bit of a problem. And when we were going out recruiting for Bill, there were candidates who were good, but I'm just sort of sitting there thinking, I just don't think, and it's not even like. It's such a special relationship, because there's very, very few people in the world I think I really couldn't work with that person, mm-hmm. and I'm sure you're the same. But it's so much more than that. I mean, it's not quite like getting married, but it is like, when times are tough and it's all going horribly wrong, this is the person that I'm just going to be sat on my own with, just working out how we're going to deal with this. And that's quite a different relationship. And that chemistry really does come into it. And I think, I don't know, you just sort of know, don't you? Mm-hmm. I think.
I've had four CEOs of my sort of top finance job, and it's a very deep relationship. You get to, it's very, I'm saying intimate, but it's not intimate, but you know what I mean? You're there through thick and thin and in the trenches together. And late night phone calls when things are going awry, particularly as a listed business. I appreciate it's a very deep, and so having that trust is important, isn't it? And
it's incredibly important. It's also being able to follow each other's sort of logic and thought. But it is. It
and knowing what they were
very,
thinking,
very, and what you're actually saying. The words you're saying. What are you trying to tell me with the words that you're saying?
Do you ever disagree publicly? Do you disagree? You must disagree.
We try not to argue in front of the children.
Yes,
if that's what you mean.
I think it's really important.
And it depends what you mean by publicly. So when we're sitting with as an exco, we will disagree, mm-hmm. but I encourage. I like the exco to disagree, mm-hmm. because I think that's a very positive thing. I think we try very, very hard not to do that outside of the exco environment.
To having that aligned view,
and certainly not when you're in charge of, when you're in front of the city and the analysts.
Yeah.
And again, it's hilarious, because we go and see analysts and we go and see funds and all that sort of stuff. And because I used to do the CFO role, I mm-hmm. kind of think I know what I'm talking about.
I'm sure you do know.
I know I don't. No, that's the point of. And I also go, we got this, and this is the margin on that product, and this is growing. And Bill's just like, and he has to sort of very gently, without saying that's actually completely wrong.
Kicking you under the
just
table.
Go, that's completely wrong. And I think again, what makes a good CFO? It's actually being able to steer your CEO back onto what you should be saying, without making him look an idiot. Yeah. But so there's a bit of that goes on as well when I go a little bit off piste with funds, and he has to kind of bring me back.
There's a really healthy tension and a healthy disagreement, which I think is really important.
Correct.
But the CFO-CEO relationship, I see that as a really they need to move together and be in sync externally with the business, otherwise it
correct.
can cause them.
But it's also that ability, because sometimes you do need to have a bit of a Barney, you know. So it's that ability to get everything out on the table and then agree and move, you know. And it's that sort of relationship.
As Barney should be exco at best, but preferably in private.
I know, absolutely. But you know, but you can fundamentally disagree with each other, and we do sometimes. But you ultimately have to get to a point of mutual respect where you can move forward. Because it goes back to what we were saying early on. I don't like the sort of command and control style that just sort of says, look, I'm doing this tough, you know, suck it up and get on with it. I do like to get to a point of going, you know, you're an intelligent human being, and Bill's super intelligent. You obviously think we should do something different to what I think. I kind of back myself, I'm reasonably intelligent. If two intelligent people with the same fact pattern can't get to the same conclusion, there's obviously something going on here that we both need to understand. And working that through is but then you're right, once you get there, then you've got to be absolutely in lockstep and execute it, because otherwise it all goes very wrong.
Amazon had this saying, a tenant, which is disagree and commit.
Yes.
And we often have disagree and commit. Now, what I think, when someone says disagree and commit, what I think it means is later I'm going to come back and say, I told you so.
Yes.
Is my
but that cuts both ways, doesn't it? It's you know, there's one acquisition we did where you know, Bill will go and sort of speak to analysts and go, oh, this acquisition is doing better than we thought it was going to do. And I'll just sit there and go, well, it's doing better than some of us thought it was going to do.
Yeah. So, there we go. You see, that's I told you so, right?
Exactly. And then you know, he'll have a little needle at me periodically as well, which is fine. But I think there are it is that disagreement, and you have to be able to disagree, and you have to be able to disagree well. And that's not just a CEO. I mean, that's with the whole of the ExCo. But I think that CEO CFO thing is so important, because you just spend so much time together.
Super. We haven't got long left, so I've got 3 questions I want to ask you. The first question is, when you listed, tell us about this. We've got lots of people that will be listening that are thinking about listing and IPOing. Tell us, how was it, and what are your top tips?
Goodness, right. So there's Gamma and there's me. So my personal listing experience was strange and unusual. I don't think this has ever happened to anybody else. So Gamma was going through the whole listing process. And one of the things you end up doing just before you list, and it's in the few weeks before you list, is you go and see a whole bunch of funds and you sort of say to them, look, we're Gamma and we'd like your money and all that sort of stuff. We were 72 hours before that first meeting, and our then CFO decided he didn't want to go through the listing process. So I was sitting at home on a Sunday afternoon, and our CEO at the time sort of phoned me and said, Andrew, can we have a chat? I said, yeah, that's fine, Bob. I'm in on Monday morning. And he went, no, kind of now. And I said, well, I can, you know, probably see in the next 3 or 4 hours, and I'm kind of now actually, just whatever you're doing, would you mind just dropping it? And this was like Sunday lunchtime, so you're having lunch and all that sort of stuff. So you kind of go and say to your wife, well, I've got to go and see Bob down in Winchester. And he kind of said, look, you know, Gamma's listing, the CFO's decided he doesn't want to do that for various reasons. Would you like a new job? So I was divisional FD at the time. Would you like to be the CFO? So that was my, and it was literally, and if you don't say yes now, we're going to have to do something else and probably pull the float and all that sort of stuff. So, you know, I'll give you 30 seconds because we kind of need to know. So that was a sort of interesting, on these things kind of.
Not that there was much riding on it, but if you don't say yes, we're going to have to pull the listing.
Well, there is that. And you know, and subsequently found out that actually brokers and things were going, nobody's ever changed a CFO 3 days before we actually go out and market. We'll give it a go, but the chances of success are minimal.
I mean, given how many listings don't work out, the fact that worked out with that change, huge change,
it was just extraordinary. Yeah. But again, I think it's one of those, you know, seizing your opportunities and stuff. You've got to do that. I mean, to have said no in that scenario would have been maddening. I mean, it could have gone.
Did you have any doubt in your mind?
Loads. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, because you have self-doubt. You have doubt about the role. You've just been parachuted into something that everyone tells you is quite hard and difficult, and it is quite hard and difficult. So you have loads and loads and loads of self-doubt. But you just have to take those opportunities sometimes, don't you?
And it works. You take it, you grab it, you make it work.
And you just make it work to the best of your ability. And you absolutely have to do that. But so that was my journey. Gamma's journey to listing. I mean, listing in the UK, it's not very fashionable at the moment. And I really think it should, because it's been a great journey for us as an organisation. It's been a great journey for us for our original shareholders, who were sort of able to sell some of their shares, but not all of their shares. The other thing it's been able to do is, as Gamma's sort of grown and grown and grown, is a lot of our employees have had shares or run share schemes and stuff, and they've been able to sort of exit those and make a bit of money as well. So it's been really, really good, I think, for all employees, not just
for investors, for employees. Yeah.
It's big. Hopefully, investors have made a bit of money, not less so in the last year or two as the stock market.
It's been a long
little bit.
18, I'm sure in the 18 years
over time definitely, but the last few years, just stock markets have been a difficult place to be. But no, it's been a great journey. It's been an amazing journey, and I love being part of a listed company. I think the benefits of it. I think both the CEO and CFO, as we were saying earlier, you've got to do what you said you were going to do, but as long as you have very supportive shareholders, and we do, they're pretty relaxed. When you turn up and go, this is our strategy, this is what we want to do, execute it. Again, they'll say, not sure about that, not sure about that. But they're supportive, and they will give you the time to execute it and make it work. And I always feel like I've probably got a bit more time than some of my peers who are maybe private equity backed to execute the strategy. So yeah, I think listing is much undervalued and underrated. But companies are undervalued, and that's the problem with it. So yeah.
And so in terms of, it's not something you can do overnight. I know you were parachuted in 72 hours before, but it's not typically people can do overnight.
Correct.
So is it something it's about 2-3 years out? You think people need to start thinking about it, and what should they be preparing?
I think it depends, because one of the other problems we have in the UK at the moment is, so Gamma listed on AIM originally, and then we've just gone up to the main market a few weeks ago.
Congratulations.
Well, thank you. But the nice thing about AIM is the regulatory burden was a bit lower.
It's reduced, yeah.
And actually, yes, you have to do some things, but the things you have to do are not, for a well-run, reasonably sized business, the things you have to do are not that difficult. And I think you would be doing a lot of them anyway. Yeah. Moving straight onto the main market, the burden's a little bit higher, and you probably end up having to do some things that you probably wouldn't be doing as a business, and employ some people in roles that you haven't got, just to sort of keep the markets happy. And I think this is where this thing that sort of says, actually, you need to be still thinking 2-3 years out. But I think if you were thinking of going on to AIM, I don't want to say you can do it overnight, but you would probably find you are much closer to being able to do that than you think you're able to do. And it's you've got to have an investable story. I mean, that, which again goes back to the sort of CEO-CFO relationship. The two of you just need to come up with what is that story you're going to take to investors. Because ultimately, yes, you need to run the business, and yes, you need to get the governance right, and da-da-da-da-da. But I mean, where it's going to fly or die is that ability to go around the city and speak to enough investors. And by the way, the reason I was able to do that, having been parachuted in 70, is I've been working at Gamma 7 or 8 years at that point. I mean, I knew Bob, the CEO, super well, because we'd been working together for that time. So you can just turn that on pretty quickly, and get to a stage where you can tell that story together.
So having a well-run business with good governance,
yes,
and having an investable story,
yes,
and then having the right people around you,
yes. And again, going back to the sort of theme of our conversation, CFOs, where they can add a ton of value is making that story investable.
Yeah, agreed.
Because you can, I have been a CFO, so I think I'm not like this, but you all have met CEOs who are a little bit ethereal. And sometimes you're going to need to just bring that back and ground that a little bit more. Not all stories are investable stories, but I think a CFO can make a good story, an investable story.
I think it's becoming increasingly important for a CFO to be a good storyteller. It's sort of an 100%. Increasing, it's not sort of those sort of bean counters perception anymore. It's a storytelling one for sure.
And I think interestingly, just having a look at what I was doing, but particularly what Bill's doing now, I think a lot of the accounting standards now are getting so prescriptive, and the latitude that you have now in the way you account for certain things. Actually, yes, you need to be able to describe the business, of course, but I think increasingly, and I was on call yesterday with about 4 people from finance, just working out how we're going to explain this weird bit of accounting.
You had a great time, didn't you? You're back in your...
I quite enjoy. I quite enjoy a bit of technical accounting. So I don't. Yes, sorry. Yeah, tragic confession time.
I'm the same.
But I do quite enjoy a bit of technical accounting. So how are we going to talk shareholders to just sort of explain? Okay, that's the result. But actually, the result might be a little bit better or a little bit worse than we thought it was, without putting 500 adjustments in, which nobody really likes, and everybody thinks you're lying. So I think that's a key skill as well. Yes, you have to explain the business, as we were sort of talking earlier on, but actually explaining the accounting increasingly to non-accountants.
Yeah, in a simple way.
That is a key skill.
Yeah. Final question.
Yes.
Obviously, I'm CFO at Bloom & Wild, where we like to send flowers to make people happy and to treat them for all sorts of occasions. If well, when this gets aired, I will send a bunch of flowers to somebody of your choosing.
Oh.
So who is your biggest cheerleader champion? Who should I be sending a bunch of flowers to?
Oh, goodness me. That is a really difficult... Well, it's not a difficult question. Is it? I'm going to say you should send them to my wife.
I thought you were going to say Bob.
No, not
Bill.
Bob.
Bill.
No, not Bill. No, that would be weird. My wife has just been wonderfully supportive over the years. And the other reason I would love you to send her some flowers is our wedding anniversary the other week, right? And I didn't send her. I always
goodness.
And I tell you why. I tell you why. Because I said to her, look, I don't want you to think I've forgotten to send you flowers, but it is so hot. It is, and we're not in. If I send you some flowers, they're going to be in that box on the porch. They will be dead.
Okay, well, it's cooled down now.
I know,
so,
yeah.
Okay, well,
so there we go.
First of all, you need to buy your wife some flowers.
I do. Well, yes,
but the weather does impact.
I can't just have the complimentary flowers because that's even worse, isn't it? Now we're saying it, I realise quite how bad what I've just said.
But no, you are right. The weather does impact. We do work hard to make sure that.
I know, and it's nobody's fault.
Yeah.
But it is on days like we've been having recently.
It's cooled down now, so get your wife some flowers,
yes,
and when this airs, we will send you.
Very kind of you.
But it's true that you can't do jobs like this without the support at home, can you? It's very important.
No, you can't, and I've been so lucky over the years. She's been absolutely brilliant. So yeah.
Okay, we will send your wife. What's your wife's name?
So it's Rachel.
Rachel, we will send Rachel some flowers.
Very kind of you. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for coming. I've really enjoyed talking to you, and congratulations for listing on the main market.
Thank you.
And yeah, thank you ever so much for coming on.
Thank you.
So Dominique, how did it go with Andrew?
Great, I really liked him. Big takeout for me was when he was talking about, for aspiring CFOs, that it's not a one-size-fits-all piece, and what takes a great CFO in one place is not in the other, and I've definitely seen that in my career. So I think the advice for me is find your niche, find where your skill set and your values and your leadership style works.
Absolutely. I liked it when he said that young people in being accountants at the moment need to work out if they want to be a CFO, and then what type of CFO. Because a lot of them just want to be one but haven't really thought about whether that's a small business or a listed business or a PE-backed.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, I was really... And he didn't list off a ream of things that were a great CFO. He actually it's very situational, very dependent on what the company needs, and that the company needs will change as well.
Yeah.
What about you? What are your two cuts?
I loved it when he was talking about the CFO to CEO transition and having to be humble. And, you start as a CFO being the expert in what you know everything about finance. And then suddenly you find yourself in the CFO role where you don't know much about marketing. So having to trust your next level down and, dealing with the uncertainty that brings.
And dealing with not knowing everything all the time.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That was
so
really
I think
insightful.
That's the takeaway for me, for sure, was that transition piece and not knowing everything and being humble enough to ask the questions.
I also really liked his vulnerability, where you think he's this listed business CEO with many years' experience, and he doesn't have it all together all the time, and so that fills me with confidence.
Being honest enough to admit it as well. Love that.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, what a great episode.
Oh, thank you, and thank you for listening. We'll see you next time.